Good afternoon and welcome to The Road to Recovery, The Road to Freedom with Mark. This is my half-hourly slot every Friday for a whole 28 minutes, just you and me. My little show's called The Road to Recovery. It's actually called The Road to Recovery, The Road to Freedom, and it's all about dealing with mental illness, about my experiences over my lifetime and some of the things that have happened to me and ideas to help people, but most of all it's about doing my bit, because we are, like it or not, essentially monkeys, little more than that. About 98% similarity between us and a chimp. And being primates as we are, we tend to follow the leader. Monkey see, monkey do, you see. And that's the very point that I try to get across to people, is what you do, other people see, and it affects them. They may not necessarily say anything or do anything at the time, but the funny thing is, if people see you behaving badly towards others or just in general, they'll mimic you. And it is also true of the opposite. If other people see you doing something for somebody else, something kind, something good, something helpful for someone, then they tend to follow what you do. You'd be amazed of what an influence you are on others, the others around you, the people in your community and your family. And being angry and nasty and negative and destructive fuels others to be like that. So if people see you doing something, there's a chance, now there's no guarantee, but there's a chance that they will see what you do and reflect upon themselves and perhaps do something themselves. And if you don't really believe me, you're probably not old enough to remember this, but there was a time when people used to just throw shit out their windows. They littered everywhere. It was a common thing when I was a child, and there would be rubbish all over the streets. And over the last couple of generations, their attitude towards pollution has totally changed. When I was a child, people never talked about caring for the environment or anything like that. People never talked about the attitudes towards mental health. And this is a very recent phenomenon in New Zealand. All of a sudden, it's become the fashionable thing to do, talk about people suffering from depression and mental health. It kind of got kicked off in this current phase of popularity by people like John Kerwin and Mike King, who were brave enough to stand up and talk about their experiences with mental illness. And because of their profile and the respect that people had for them, it went a long way to begin a groundswell of change, which the government picked up on, especially Jacinda Ardern, and started doing something about it after decades of absolutely nothing. Basically, if people were really badly mentally ill back in the day, they would be chucked in mental institutions and basically just tortured and locked in cells with no handles so that they couldn't get out. And they were locked away and forgotten. And then the government decided that that didn't work and it was too expensive, so they just throw everyone back out on the streets and let society handle it. And that was the government's attitude in the day. And that stayed that way for a long time, until finally this wave of change, which kind of pisses me off when things become popularist and everyone jumps on the bandwagon and now everyone's, ooh, I am hope. And my fear about that is that this will be gone and forgotten in another year or two when some other titillation for the masses comes along. And here I am, having done this job and paid for it out of my own pocket, sacrificed my food budget to do my work for years and years and years on mental illness, and all of a sudden people are raising huge amounts of money, whereas I don't even have sponsorship, and people like Michael and Veronica at Arrow Radio have allowed me to do this program for nothing. It's supposed to be sponsored, and it would be really nice for someone to pay my petrol bill, but it's never going to happen. And long after everyone has forgotten and this is no longer popular, I guarantee you I'll still be doing my thing, because I feel that I have to contribute in some way, and if I can make a difference and I can help, then that's what I do. And, I'm not about to start a Give a Little page or any crap like that. I just want to do my bit. And I want to say thank you for the sponsors that are there. Crowds like New Zealand on the Wairarapa TV having come along, thank you very much. All the great sponsors that sponsor Arrow Radio, to Michael and Veronica, who do fantastic work for their community. Long may it last. And I just hope that some people who might tune into this realise that we're in this for the long term, and I'd like to think that you'll continue to support us long after this trend has kind of washed away. Right, well, got to get on with today's story. That's part of what I do. I wrote all these short stories, some of them years ago. Today I'm going to read the very first one that I ever wrote. It's called A Dog's Day, and it's a good tale. And rather than about my adventures overseas, this is about my adventures out on the Tora coast, out towards White Rock there. A wonderful part of the Wairarapa, and, there are so many wonderful places out there. This show I would like to dedicate to an old friend of mine. His name was Trevor Heath. Terry King was his birth name, and he was killed 20 years ago up at Mount Powell. He was shot through the head, and he wasn't a good person, but he had many redeeming qualities, and I do rather miss Trevor. So this is for you, mate. The Dog's Day. It has been said that dogs live with determination. Never is that more true than in a hunting dog. The old mate, who I'll refer to as Tom for short, woke me up about 4 a.m. The air was cool as we geared up for a hunt. Tom's Winchester 30-30 lever-action rifle felt cold and heavy, but its advantages of being short so as not to catch on branches and its mule-like kick made it essential for our adventure. Spare bullets, a sticking knife and some twine rounded out the kit. We were travelling particularly light for this trip, and I felt like a passenger as I pulled on my boots and shouldered the 30-30. Tom chose 4 dogs from the kennels, all of them making a terrible racket as their time drew close, the excitement palpable. They stank but were fit to burst, rushing around yet staying very near Tom, their master. The dog's loyalty to Tom unquestioned, despite the indifferent attitude shown them. Orders were curt and short as we made for the quad bike, and the dogs came to join us. Tom kicked the motor over, and I sat side saddle on the mudguard and pinned myself in by bracing my legs against the front. The dogs all tried to jump up on the back tray, but could not fit, and tussled amongst themselves in a game of King of the Castle. No bites or fangs, as they were happy enough to jog alongside as we slowly pulled away, down the drive and up the first incline, through some gates, and we were into the bush. Suddenly the attitude of the dogs changed to become more quiet and confidently intense. In the cool of the morning, the stars slowly began to disappear, still a little dark as we picked up first sign. Rutted soil, so fresh, even we could smell it, and shit the size of a Coke can, which is where our name for them came from. The spoor of a big tusker boar the top prize in pig hunting, which had already passed by. The two lightest dogs, our finders, showed some interest and quickly swept the gully in the next ridge, but swung back. They understand the role required, despite no orders. Havoc and Quinn, the finders, having the right smarts and light body type for the job. They are both mongrels, Havoc the dark and Quinn the more grey in the coat, but nature seems to have mixed the best in them. The other two hanging back can find as well, but will act as bailers or holders today. They must stop the pig and hopefully give it a good stretch. Their names are Bob and Meg. Both dark, Bob is the oldest and most proven. Meg is the youngest and must prove herself worthy to stay. The bush we are passing is treacherously steep, and I am grateful for the quad bike despite the noise and discomfort. We travel some 10 kilometres along a fire break, then park it up. At first the silence is overwhelming, the air so clear the sun's first rays play tricks with it. I stare up, my mouth agape at this wonder, as Tom smiles knowingly. "Come on," is all he says, and begins along the fire break. The dogs quickly fall into line, two left, two right, and I bring up the rear with the rifle. Up and down, up and down. The further we walk, the more I have second thoughts about today, for I have a specific task too. My job is to tip up the pig by grabbing its hind leg so it can be stuck or dispatched with a knife. Once the beast is gutted, my job is then to carry it on back to the quad bike. I have been designated the bearer, so the further we go, the longer my return. We come across some more fresh sign, and the finders quickly fan out and down in sweeping runs. I can hear them crashing through the bush occasionally, then a bated silence as we wait for the anticipated bark as one of the finders catches sight of his quarry. In these hundreds of hectares of regenerating native bush Tom lives on, he has introduced many pigs, and the trophies of many boars' jawbones, including hooks, are nailed up all around Tom's place. I have little doubt of our success, but I feel some trepidation as we distance ourselves from transport. So far nothing, and the sun has risen. I feel its warmth despite it only being a little after dawn. The blue sky promises a blistering hot day where scent and trail will disappear as the pigs seek water and shade further down the gullies. The dogs have been gone a little while, tracking a mob of pigs. From the tracks, one boar, a bunch of females and some young. If sprung, the cunning bull will run uphill through the mob and sacrifice the young to save himself. A good dog will stay on the boar if possible, but in the ensuing chaos may have to choose a lesser prize. This is where a good dog shows his true quality. Be it God or nature, some special dogs like old Bob will stay on the biggest pig he alone can wrestle or bail. Hopefully by then the rest of us can close in and the bail proceed as planned. To this point they hunt silently, crossing and recrossing the track through the bush, working their way down the gully in pursuit. Tom and I wait silently, having a smoke and listening quietly for the first telltale bark. I sense the anticipation. Tom is like a coiled spring despite his quiet nature. Then suddenly it comes, a faint, high-pitched bark, which leaves us in no doubt. A finder has sprung the mob. More barking as the mob breaks. Moving around it sounds like they are escaping, and we hesitate our pursuit. Then a second dog rings out nearby. We look at each other, then charge headlong through the bush. I am so pleased for the short rifle, as the going is tough through dense bush, but soon I find the bottom of the gully and the pig's tracks. Tom and I lose track of each other as the noise intensifies and a squeal breaks out. The pigs break and tear off down the gully, and Tom and I regroup, then come across where the fight ensued. We wait for another bail or for the dogs to return. Excitement and disappointment are tempered with relief as I realise what a haul it would have been from this place. Soon old Bob returns to us with blood on his face. It had been close, but the pigs managed to break downhill and escape. We'll try them again later, Tom informs me with casual confidence. Meg returns, so Tom wolf whistles for the others to return, and we slog our way back to the top of the gully. By now there is real heat in the sun, but we push on with greater urgency as we lose the advantage of morning. Returning empty-handed is an option neither one of us want to consider. More tracks, sign and sweeps as the sun begins to beat down and the cicada's song pulses almost as one great choir. After a few more kilometres, we stop at the head of a large gully where a breeze rises from below. We strip down and lie down in the scrub near the edge of the track. It offers a bit of a mattress and protection from the sun. Another wolf whistle brings the other two dogs up. Tom pulls out a pair of binoculars and scans the gully below across this broad, sweeping opening. Before long, Tom spots a sow with young in tow across the other side, trip-trotting like little circus performers. We decide not to pursue, and the dogs seem happy to stay, lie around and sniff the breeze. These dogs are veterans and know not to exhaust themselves, preferring to lap at muddy puddles and lie around for a bit. They come up to us for reassurance, the bush having cleaned them up a bit. We speak to them in soft, low tones, and although tense, they seem satisfied for the while. Tom and I trade a few tales while we wait, and I wander down to find water. The thick bush smells wonderful, and the foliage cools the place nicely. So I return, reassured our afternoon effort will not be beyond me. This gully opens wide and flattish, coated with various types of bush, where pig and deer might hide. As the sun rises high, Tom decides to strike out again, this time to quietly follow the gully down to a natural wallow where the pigs might be holed up for the afternoon. We have the important advantage of staying upwind from them all the way. The dogs noiselessly close in behind as we look for tracks or sign. Before long we come across more rooted up soil and fresh droppings. The dogs show immediate interest. Havoc and Quinn break as if ordered and scoot off down the gully. Meg and Bob decide to follow, and we're not far behind, with Tom leading. Within minutes, another bark breaks out, much closer to us, and Tom halts us both. Soon barking and growling evidences another bail, and we pursue. The mob break up the side of the gully, but the dogs stay on the job for a second bail and some bracken. We half swim through the bracken and fallen trees referred to as tiger country. We're so close. The last is a frustrating slog, and I come across an unreal sight. Quinn and Havoc have bailed the longest pig I have ever seen. Through the snarls and mock charges, it slowly dawns on me that they have two big sows back to back. Each of them is on ahead, and they mean business. The other two dogs have another pig further down, but we must concentrate on the sows, lest the dogs get bitten. The squealing and growling intensifies, but I am unable to get through the bracken to tip the pig up. "Give me the gun," shouts Tom, and I respond quickly. Tom ploughs in, releasing the safety and shouting encouragement to the dogs as he goes. He knows a clean shot is impossible. Only a hip shot will do in this situation, and he dumps off a shot. One of the sows breaks as both dogs set on the dying beast, and we swim into the site of the kill and pull the dogs off with reassuring praise of "good boy." As I close in, the sow was still twitching, despite a clean heart-lung shot, the light of life slowly flickering out in her eyes. We go through the motions of tipping her up and sticking it through the heart. She is pregnant with piglets, so looks huge at first glance. "Yum, in pig sow," says Tom, as he guts our prey with ruthless efficiency. Having never eaten an in-pig sow, it means little to me at the time. We tie up the front legs of the carcass, and Tom helps lift it onto my back. Its front legs over my shoulders, literally piggyback style. I start the slow march back to the top of the gully, and the carcass feels twice the estimated 50 kilos. Sweat begins to pour, and I immediately regret smoking. Doubts enter my mind as I look up to where we ascended from. My heart thumps its complaint at this exertion, but finally I finish the first pull and collapse out onto the track. The animal's blood is poured down my back and legs, warm and sticky. Gross as it is, I try to ignore it, as all 4 dogs emerge from the bush, with Tom, who has a satisfied look on his face. "That'll be a good carry," he muses unhelpfully. I catch my breath and begin the carry proper. With every uphill pull, the air seems to get hotter and sweat pours off my nose. I dare not look up, but hold steady and constant. Tom can only make jokes and tease me, as this is a cakewalk in comparison to many he has had to endure. Still, there is a glimmer of sympathy in his voice as I slog on through the heat. The dogs too seem satisfied with their work and amble along, showing no ill effects from their earlier battles. I am quietly pleased the dogs did not get gored or poked by a big boar. Those ivory tusks can rip the guts out of an unlucky dog, and Tom has had to stitch up his dogs many times. Finally, the quad bike comes into view, and I am exhausted by the constant haul, so I am glad to be relieved from my burden. "Look at the state of you," laughs Tom. "Still, that was a good carry," he muses. Even some fit guys struggle with that part." The small compliment, a little satisfaction, despite my utter exhaustion. We tie the pig to the back of the bike, fire it up, and begin the slow haul back home in the afternoon heat. Thoughts stray to shade and a cold drink as we near the house, but for a couple of jobs. When we reach the house, I fetch a couple of cold drinks, while Tom hangs the beast and scorches the hair off with a gas torch. After its defurring and delousing by fire, we hang the pig in the coolhouse, purpose-built for the job. We put the dogs back in their kennels with a few compliments, and I rid myself of bloodied clothes and shower off the remains as Tom tidies up the carcass. Once we're both cleaned up, we review the day's hunt, and Tom extols the virtues of the treat we were in for later that night. A few hours later, a hind quarter is removed and set to roast, my hunger and anticipation increasing with every passing drink. As the sun sets and a few friends gather, we begin the feast of roast pork and potatoes with roast vegetables. The meat tastes like a mix between mutton and pork. As delectable as promised, the banquet seems to quench my tiredness, but eventually I must to bed. My dreams that night are filled with chasing pigs up hills and down gullies. The dogs are quiet all night with full bellies and the satisfaction of a job well done. I know another adventure is just around the corner. The dogs seem to know it too. The end. That was a dog's day. I hope you enjoyed that. It brought back some great memories of my days hunting out of Tora. We did some commercial fishing out there, and when the weather was too shitty for us to go fishing, we'd go hunting. So we were always active, and we basically lived off the land. We didn't go into town very much at all. And in those days, when Shirley was alive, Stewie and I would sit around and smoke cigarettes in the old cabin, and all we had was kerosene lighting, and she was very, very primitive, but we had a wonderful time. It was an amazing life. I have not done much of that sort of thing in my lifetime. I spent a lot of my time travelling, and I lived in London and Europe, and things are extremely different over there as opposed to here, and especially very, very different when it comes to the outdoors, the sea, boats, fishing, hunting, all that sort of stuff. Just isn't really done that much over there. There is a little bit of hunting, but it's very, very different to what we do. And, you don't realise when you're growing up in a country like this just how unique and how wonderful it is. You take a lot for granted because you've never known any different. But coming back to New Zealand certainly gave me a far greater appreciation for my home and a determination to see more of this country. And that was one of the reasons that I moved up to the Wairarapa to enjoy this wonderful country and really immerse myself in it. And to recover, because, when I lived in Wellington, I had a breakdown, so I moved up here to just to recoup and recover. And, I was pretty stuck for a few years, just, stuck in a black world of hurt. And, I think to some degree at least, the countryside helped to heal me over time. And although maybe I'm not 100% yet, I am on that road, and I feel far happier and far freer up here than I have for many, many years, so I'm enjoying it. Well, that's my show for today. I'd just like to remind you, if you can help anyone from, who was suffering from any mental health issues, be that difference maker, and you just might save a life. Thanks for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll catch you again next week. Bye for now.